Let me take you to a construction site and I'll try to make you familiar with some common terminology. Okay, now listen to this very carefully. This picture in front of you is a structure and it essentially is a combination of different key elements. Well, we have a key element in the form of a beam. Well, to start off, or to be very blunt, beam is basically a horizontal member whose responsibility is to withstand the load by resisting bending. Now, then there is another key element in the form of a column. So what's a column? It's a compression member and is a structural element that transmits through compression the weight of the structure above to other structural elements below. For example, if you're living in a multi-storied building, say you're living on the third floor, so the responsibility of a column is to transfer the load from third floor to the second floor, and then from second floor to the first floor, and then first floor to the ground floor. That's it. That's exactly what a column does. It transfers the load from the floor above to the floor below by resisting compression. Now, the third key element is what you call a slab. Okay, so what exactly is a slab? It's a flat piece of concrete and it serves as a walking surface, but it may also serve as a load bearing member. And there are many more other key elements as well. Now, if we were to focus on beams in particular, okay, it is a structural element that is capable of withstanding load primarily by resisting bending. Guys, in order to clearly understand the concept of shear forces, we first need to know what exactly do we mean by a normal force. Now, if you watch carefully, here we have an object which has sort of a square cross section. Okay, now if we can have the axis, yeah, here it is. I'm going to be applying axial forces at both the ends. This is the starting end and this is the rear end. Okay, now let me have the axial forces. Now, basically the axial force is such that it acts along the axis. That's it. Now, if you watch carefully, if I can make an axis over here, something like this. If you watch carefully, this axial force is making a 90-degree angle. All right, with the vertical axis of the cross section and also a 90-degree angle with the horizontal axis also. That's why, since it is making a 90-degree angle, and hence this name, normal force. So whenever you're dealing with normal forces, you'll always see that the force is going to make a 90-degree angle at the cross section or with the cross section. Okay, so that was all about normal forces. Okay, now what sort of a normal force is this? Now the nature of this force is such that it tries to lengthen the bar, or I can also say it tries to increase the length of the bar, and hence the name of the force is what you call tensile force. Okay, the force which tries to pull the bar from both the direction or tries to increase the length of the bar is something that you generally refer to as a tensile force. Okay, let's take a look at a different kind of a normal force. Here it is. This is the object. Let's have the axis, and now let me reverse the direction of the force. Okay, again this is an axial force. Okay, normal force in fact, and to be very precise, if you watch carefully, the nature of this force is such that it tries to shorten the length of the object. Okay, or you can also say that it tries to compress the object, and therefore this sort of a force is something that we refer to as the compressive force. Now let's take a look at what shear force means. Okay, here we go. If you watch carefully, this is the same object and the way in which we are going to be applying the force will be slightly different. Let me show you exactly what I'm trying to say. Now if you watch carefully guys, here the force was making a 90-degree angle with the cross section, but here this force is parallel to the cross section. That is one condition, parallel to cross section. Okay, and here the force applied was perpendicular to cross section. That's the first difference. What is the other difference? The second difference is, if you watch carefully, this is the longitudinal axis of the object, and if you watch carefully, the angle made between the longitudinal axis and the force over here is going to be equal to 90 degrees. So that is also one difference. Okay, that means the force that we are going to apply in case of a shear force, it's going to be equal to 90 degrees with respect to the longitudinal axis. Now one force is along the negative x direction, you can say negative x, while the other force I'm going to be applying over here in the positive x direction. Now if we just assume that the object cannot rotate, what will happen? Okay, what will happen? Just think about this. This is exactly what could happen. Yeah, this action that you saw just now is what you call shear. Okay, and the force primarily responsible for such an action is what you refer to as a shear force. Okay, so basically that's the general idea of a shear force with respect to mechanical engineering or with respect to even civil engineering. Now let me show you a different case of a shear force. Let's have an object again and let's have the forces. Now if you watch careful guys, the forces over here are acting in the positive y and the negative y direction. Okay, so what kind of an effect or what kind of an impact are these forces going to have? Again, we are assuming that the object cannot rotate. All right, this is the effect that they're going to have. This is the shearing action that takes place, and the force primarily responsible for the shearing action is what you call a shear force. That's it. So essentially this was all about shear forces from the perspective of mechanical and civil engineering. Now let's take a very general and casual look at how this shear force is affecting our day-to-day life. So here we go. Well, these are not just pictures, but these are real life scenarios where knowingly or unknowingly we come across shear forces. Let me explain you all of this one by one. Well, let's begin by taking a look at this loaf of bread which is being sliced. The motion of this knife is downwards. You can also say that it is applying a tangential force on the cross section of this bread loaf. And when this completely passes through, we have a slice of bread. So that's one way of looking at shear force. Now let's focus on this kid brushing his teeth. The toothbrush is moving tangentially sideways, up, down. You can say that the kid is applying shear force in an attempt to remove the germs from his teeth. So that's another way of looking at shear force. In Hindus, a tilak or a tika is applied on the forehead just by sliding the ring finger from down to top right between the eyes and onto the forehead. A painter doing strokes on a canvas is also an example of shear force. Counting notes, that is sliding a note from one hand to the other, is also a result of shear force. Applying cream or lotion may be a daily routine for all of us, but even that is governed by shear forces. And finally, a device that this generation is absolutely obsessed with, a smartphone. Even here, sliding is all because of shear force applied by the finger and onto the screen. To understand bending moment, we first need to learn what exactly moment means. Whenever you turn something, you need a force and of course a pivot. Well, if you try to push further away from the pivot, then you're able to turn the object more easily. Therefore, we need a parameter to describe this kind of an activity. This is where moment comes into the picture. Well, mathematically, moment is just a product of force applied and the perpendicular distance from the pivot. You can also say that a moment represents the effectiveness of a force in rotating, bending, or even twisting an object. If you think of a door, you can either open or close the door with far less effort if you apply the force far away from the hinge than if you apply the force close to the hinge. Now let's take a look at bending moment. So it's a moment which tends to cause some item to bend. Okay. For example, if Johnny Bravo sits at the end of a tree branch, he's causing it to bend. Obviously, the branch will bend downwards and may even break if Johnny is too heavy. So essentially, if you move closer to the tree, you are reducing the lever arm of your weight. Hence, the bending moment reduces. The branch is then better able to support your weight with minimum deflection and it is less likely to break. Let's have one more example. Imagine a thin plank of wood resting on a brick at each end. This is similar to a simply supported beam. Now, imagine a child standing on the plank. It bends, but it does not break. Therefore, the bending moment due to the child is being resisted by the plank. However, if the bulky Johnny Bravo stood on the plank, it may break at the center. This is due to the bending moment being too great for the plank to resist. That is the physical significance of bending moment. Why does the plank break at the center and not somewhere else? This is due to the bending moment distribution pattern, which is maximum at the center of a simply supported beam.
When a beam is loaded, internal forces develop within it to maintain equilibrium. These internal forces have two components. We have shear forces, oriented in the vertical direction, and we also have normal forces, which are oriented along the axis of the beam. If the beam is sagging, the top of the beam will get shorter, and so the normal forces in the top of the beam will be compressive. The bottom of the beam will get longer, and so the normal forces in the bottom of the beam will be tensile. Each of the tensile normal forces has a corresponding compressive force, which is equal in magnitude but opposite in direction. As such, these forces don't produce a net normal force, but they do produce a moment. This means we can conveniently represent the internal forces acting on the beam cross-section using just two resultants. One, shear force, which is a resultant of the vertical internal forces, and one bending moment, which is a resultant of the normal internal forces. This is a very common way of representing the internal forces within a beam. Drawing the shear force and bending moment diagrams is just figuring out what these internal forces are at each location along the beam. These resultant shear forces and bending moments will depend on the loads acting on the beam and the way in which the beam is supported. Beams can be loaded in a number of ways, the most common being concentrated forces, distributed forces, and concentrated moments. Beams can also be supported in a number of different ways. They can have pin supports, roller supports, or be fully fixed, which each restrain the beam in different ways. Pin supports prevent vertical and horizontal displacements, but allow rotation. Roller supports prevent vertical displacements, but allow horizontal displacement and rotation. Fixed supports prevent all displacements and rotation. If a certain degree of freedom is restrained at a support, we will have a corresponding reaction force or reaction moment at that location. For example, rotations are permitted for a pin support, so there is no reaction moment, but displacements in the vertical and horizontal directions are prevented, so we will have horizontal and vertical reaction forces.
Let's take an example of simple supported beam subjected to 2-point loads as shown over here. To solve this problem, we can divide the solution into 3 simple steps. Step number 1, calculation of reaction forces. Step number 2, calculation of shear forces. And step number 3, calculation of bending moments. So let's start with the step number 1, that is calculation of support reactions. To calculate reaction forces, we need help of 3 very small but important equilibrium conditions. That is, summation of vertical forces equals to 0, summation of horizontal forces equals to 0, and summation of moment at any given point equals to 0. So these are some important equations. We'll see later on how to use them. First of all, we need to draw a free body diagram of this beam. A free body diagram, or FBD for short, shows all internal and external forces acting on the beam. Here we have 2 external point loads, 14 kN and 28 kN. Then we also have 2 reactions at point A and point B. Point A is a hinge support, so it will have 2 reactions, one horizontal and one vertical. As there is no horizontal or inclined force on the beam, the horizontal reaction at point A will be 0, so no need to calculate that reaction. That means we need only 2 equilibrium conditions to calculate remaining 2 reactions. Before we write down any equation, we need to remember sign convention for these forces. Forces going upward are considered as a positive force, while forces going downwards are considered as a negative forces. Now we'll apply the first equilibrium condition, that is sum of all vertical forces equals to 0. So we'll get Ra plus Rb minus 14 minus 28 equals to 0. Ra and Rb both are going upward, so they are positive, and external forces 14 kN and 28 kN both are going downward. Hence both are negative in this equation. Now rearrange this equation and we'll have Ra plus Rb equals to 42. Let's call this as equation number 1. Now apply the second equilibrium condition, that is sum of all moment at any point equals to 0. We can apply this equation at any point, but in order to remove one unknown reaction, we need to apply this equilibrium condition at either point A or point B. So let's apply it at point B. So we have Ra into 7 minus 14 into 5 minus 28 into 2 equals to 0. Let's call this as equation number 2. If you look at this equation, you will see moment due to external loads 14 kN and 28 kN are negative and moment due to reactions are positive. This is due to sign convention. Let's try to understand what are these sign convention. Imagine our beam is kept between a clock and we are calculating bending moment at point B. Force P will rotate our beam in clockwise direction and it will be taken as positive. Similarly, force Q will rotate our beam in anti-clockwise direction, which is taken as negative. There is one more alternative way to understand this sign convention. All moments that bend our beam in downward direction like this, they are considered as positive moment. And all the moments that bend our beam in upward direction like this are taken as a negative. You can remember any of these two methods for understanding the sign convention. Let's get back to our step number 1. As both forces are rotating our beam at point B in anti-clockwise direction, they are taken as negative. Let's solve equation number 2 for Ra. Then we get Ra equals to 18 kN. This is how we get our first reaction at point A. To get the reaction at point B, put the value of Ra in equation number 1 and we will have value of Rb as 24 kilonewtons. Now we have what it takes to calculate shear forces and bending moment. Let's calculate the shear force in step number 1. Shear forces and bending moment calculated from either left side or right side. Most people calculate it from left to right. To calculate shear forces, hide the beam and loads on the right side except the point where we need to calculate the shear force. At start, we'll hide all the loads and the beam portion to the right side of point A. So shear force at point A equals to reaction at point A, which is 18 kN. As this is going upward, shear force diagram will show 18 kN above x-axis like this. Now we'll move to point C. Now shear force will be calculated at the left side of point C. On the left side of point C, there is no force but the reaction at support A. So shear force to the left side of point C is again equals to 18 kN. Now we have reached to point C. There is a point load 14 kN at point C. So shear force at point C equals to reaction Ra, which is 18 minus 14. 14 kN as negative as it is going downward. So shear force at point C equals to 18 minus 14, that is 4 kN. Let's move to point D and repeat the same procedure. Shear force to the left of point D is equals to 18 minus 14 equals to 4 kN and shear force at point D equals to 18 minus 14 minus 28, that is equals to minus 24. As shear force at point D is negative, it will be shown below the x-axis. Let's go ahead to point B and repeat the same procedure once more. Shear force to the left of point B equals to 18 minus 14 minus 28, that is equals to minus 24, and shear force at point B equals to 18 minus 14 minus 28 plus reaction at point B, that is 24 kN. So shear force at point B is 0. If we don't get the shear force at support as 0, it means we have made some calculation errors. This is how we can calculate the shear force and draw the shear force diagram for any given beam. Let's move to our next step, that is step number 3, calculation of bending moments. Bending moment at a point is the product of force multiplied by perpendicular distance between that load and the point about which we have to calculate the moment. If we want to determine the bending moment at point B due to force F, it will be equals to F into distance between the point B and load F, that is L, and its unit will be kilonewton meters. To calculate bending moment, we'll do the same thing. Hide all the loads and beam to the right side. So bending moment at point A equals to reaction Ra multiplied by 0. Next, that is, the value will be 0. Next, bending moment at point C is Ra into perpendicular distance between point A and point C, that is 2 meter. So bending moment at point C is 36 kilonewton meter. As force 14 kilonewton is passing through point C, its moment at point C will be 0, hence not considered at this point. Similarly, bending moment at point D is Ra multiplied by 5 minus 14 into 3, and its value is 48 kilonewton meter. Now finally, bending moment at point B is Ra into 7 minus 14 into 5 minus 28 into 2, and its value should come as a 0 at support. This means our calculation of bending moment is right.